John and I tied the knot 22 years ago in the small church in our hometown. Our early years of marriage were filled with love, passion, and dreams of a shared future. We enjoyed our closeness at night and couldn't get enough of each other during the day. We used to stroll hand in hand through the charming streets of our town, stealing kisses at every turn. A couple of years later, our daughter Emily was born, and our focus shifted to raising her. Over time, our relationship lost some of its initial excitement and transformed into a typical family routine. John pursued a career as a long-haul truck driver, going on week-long trips across the country and always looking forward to returning home to my warmth and care. These reunions felt like honeymoons, and this arrangement suited both of us. I started my own small, cozy beauty salon and gradually earned a reputation among local fashion-conscious individuals. As Emily grew up and pursued a prestigious degree in interior design at an out-of-state university, John and I took pride in her determination and hard work. However, during John's most recent visit home, I began to feel irritation and tension in his presence. I found myself annoyed by every little thing about him, from his morning coffee drinking habits to his nightly snoring. I eagerly looked forward to the end of his vacation, yearning for some alone time. 2 days later, John set off on another long-haul trip across multiple states. Without much regret, I bid him farewell and eagerly anticipated 3 weeks of solitude in our cozy house on the outskirts. The prospect of living for myself brought me increasing joy. During the first week, I focused on self-care, sleeping in, reading books by lamplight, and enjoying solitary lunches at my favorite restaurants. I relished the freedom from daily responsibilities and the ability to live solely for my pleasure. However, by the middle of John's journey, I began to feel a sense of boredom and longing for his return. One warm April day, I ventured to take a walk around the town square near our house, but an unexpected chilly wind forced me into a cozy corner cafe for a warm cappuccino. The waiter, a young, tall, and handsome man, turned out to be the son of an old friend, Aaron. We chatted, reminiscing about mutual friends and acquaintances. Later, I placed an order and couldn't help but admire Aaron's professionalism and charm. I found myself captivated by his confidence, broad shoulders, and enchanting smile. His attentive and admiring gaze made me feel incredibly beautiful and desirable, despite no longer being a young woman. I couldn't get Aaron out of my mind that night. For the first time in years, I had an enticing erotic dream involving Aaron. The following day, I found it challenging to focus at my salon due to persistent thoughts and fantasies about the young man. I frequently checked Aaron's social media profiles and photos. One day, John caught me looking at Aaron's Instagram and became suspicious. We argued, with John feeling that I was hiding something from him. Even on his last trip, John left without a proper goodbye. A few days after he departed, Aaron messaged me on Facebook, confessing his thoughts about me and his desire to meet again. I believed it was fate and eagerly suggested meeting at a cozy Italian restaurant by the waterfront. After dinner and a few glasses of wine, we kissed in the back seat of a taxi, leading to an unforgettable night. I was aware that John would be away on the road for another 3 weeks, so I had no reservations about inviting Aaron to stay with me during that time. On weekends, we ventured on picnics to a scenic valley outside the city, strolled hand in hand in secluded areas of the city park, and watched romantic movies at the cinema, where we shared kisses in the back row. I was excited by the idea of having a passionate affair with a young lover while my husband was off on long trips. However, what truly thrilled me were the passionate nights spent with the energetic 20-year-old in our marital bed. It felt like a rekindling of my youthful, carefree dating days. The deception was unexpectedly unveiled in the most shocking manner. John luckily returned from his trip a couple of days earlier than planned. Remembering our big argument before he left and the 2 weeks of no communication, he decided to surprise me. Arriving home, John brought a large bouquet of red roses and a bottle of champagne, looking forward to a romantic evening with me after our time apart. Little did he know how this day would take a dreadful turn. As he neared the house, he noticed the dimmed lights in the bedroom and living room, which pleased him as it indicated I was already home. With anticipation, he quietly entered the house using his key. Beautiful instrumental music played in the living room. Leaving the bouquet and champagne in the kitchen, he cautiously ascended the stairs to the bedroom. The door was partially open, and a horrifying sight met his eyes. I, his beloved wife, whom he had missed for 2 weeks, was without clothes, tan, kneeling before a young man who held me by the hair with my hands cuffed behind my back. The young man was the first to notice John in the doorway, recoiling in fear. I turned around in confusion. I barely had time to register John's clenched fists before he lunged at my lover in a blind rage, brutally assaulting him with my handcuffs. I could do nothing to intervene but scream and cry helplessly, pleading with my husband to stop the violence. Finally, John, breathing heavily, pulled away from the battered young man. His hands were still clenched as he stared into my eyes, exuding a mix of disgust and a desire to tear me apart. I backed against the wall and tried to explain, but John refused to listen. He moved closer and punched the wall beside me with great force. In that moment, fear consumed me, and I mentally prepared to face dire consequences. However, John managed to keep his composure, not wanting to escalate the situation further. "Get out of here now," he growled, pushing the lovers without clothes out the door despite our protests. His anger was so intense that he didn't care what would become of us in our disheveled state. He didn't know, nor did he want to know, what happened to us afterward. The following day, John filed for divorce at the marriage registration office. In the evening, he drank at a bar until he passed out. When he woke up the next morning with a severe hangover, he realized that his life was completely shattered and he had to start anew at the age of 45. It was excruciatingly difficult and painful. He saw me a few times during the divorce and property division process. I begged for forgiveness, cried, and pleaded with him to keep our family intact for the sake of our shared past and our daughter. However, John remained resolute. Later, he learned that I did move in with the young lover despite objections from his mother and disapproval from friends and acquaintances. Although he told our daughter that he wished us happiness, deep down he still harbored resentment towards us both. He realized our relationship was destined to fail due to our age and life experience differences. In time, the young man would likely find a younger partner, leaving me alone. John decided to move forward and not dwell on the past. He relocated to a different city, found an interesting new job, and met a woman his own age who understood him. While the scars on his soul remained, life carried on. To unexpectedly find myself in a situation like the one I'm about to describe, where I have to reevaluate the two people I care about the most, is quite surprising. It serves as a reminder that trust can be a complex and unpredictable thing. Sometimes deceitful people can be among our loved ones, even within our own families. So let's begin with the fact that I never believed in love at first sight until I met Emily. We worked together at a fast food restaurant, and I was instantly drawn to her striking blue eyes, radiant smile, and long blonde hair. Before Emily came into my life, I was comfortable with the casual dating scene. For a while, I had different girls visiting my place almost every night, and I initially thought that's what I wanted. However, Emily taught me a valuable lesson without even physical contact from the start. I understood that winning her over wouldn't be easy. Emily resisted my advances because she thought I was like the other guys she'd encountered. I assumed she found me somewhat unpleasant despite our brief conversations, which rarely exceeded 5 minutes. I was determined to show her that I was different. I did have some similarities with those guys, but I genuinely wanted to change. So I spent several weeks trying to convince her of my true uniqueness, which meant breaking down the false image I had created. Before this story unfolds, it's important to note that I hadn't finished college at that time. I had a challenging period in my life when I decided to drop out of school, feeling like the world was against me. This story is familiar to many people who have faced similar challenges. I believe the education system was unjust, especially because I struggled with social anxiety. Unfortunately, by the time I found a therapist to help me, I had already made the decision to leave school. So I began working at a fast food restaurant, feeling like my parents had lost faith in me. Despite my decision to leave school, my parents supported me by covering therapy costs while I lived in their basement. However, I couldn't escape the shadow of my older brother John, who was a star in their eyes. He had an office job and an economics degree, and he was even getting ready to marry his high school sweetheart. Throughout most of my life, I tried to measure up to his success. Despite my academic setbacks, I relentlessly searched for ways to earn my parents' approval and prove my worth. I became consumed by the idea of surpassing him in their eyes. It seemed like an impossible task, and I felt like a loser compared to John's accomplishments. This was the most painful part, and every day I spent in the basement, I felt the weight of my family's rejection. It was disheartening to feel like an outcast in a place where unconditional acceptance should have been the norm. Life began to lose its appeal, and simply existing became a struggle. To break down Emily's barriers, I realized I needed to break down my own. I started with small acts of affection, like holding the door open for her and dealing with customers we both disliked. I focused on genuinely listening to her, putting aside my own careless thoughts, and maintaining a respectful and attentive demeanor. Gradually, I noticed her guard began to come down, and she started opening up to me. When I entered a relationship with Emily, it felt like I stepped into a whole new world where I could finally breathe freely. I hadn't even realized how trapped I'd been until she let her walls down, revealing the incredible person she truly was. Every date with her turned into an exciting adventure, meticulously crafted by her creative spirit. We ventured beyond the ordinary, discovering hidden gems and fascinating places. We even took spontaneous trips to nearby cities in Emily's trusty Toyota. One of our favorite pastimes was visiting amusement parks. Despite my paralyzing fear of heights, Emily encouraged me to ride roller coasters, and her presence gave me an unwavering sense of strength. With her, I felt invincible as she continually reminded me that life was meant to be enjoyed no matter the obstacles. She saw potential in me, even when I didn't see it myself. When I finally mustered the courage to share my life story with her, I expected laughter or rejection, but her response was entirely unexpected. Despite it being a joking remark, my living situation in my parents' basement and my lack of a high school diploma could have made Emily doubt me as an ideal partner, but that wasn't the case. She empathized with my struggles because she had faced similar challenges with her own parents. They were demanding and overbearing, constantly pressuring her to meet their standards. Instead of caving into that pressure, Emily boldly chose to chart her own path and live life on her terms. Even in modest living conditions, in a small apartment near a diner, she made the most of her space, turning it into a cozy haven that felt like ours. Thanks to her influence, I learned to cherish the seemingly insignificant moments that often slip by unnoticed. This was one of the many qualities I admired in her. In her presence, I discovered a safe space where I could be truly authentic, free from the weight of my parents' expectations and the scrutiny of others. So her betrayal was especially hard to accept. Against my better judgment, I introduced Emily to my parents. The reason behind this decision remained unclear to me, as I had long stopped caring about their opinion. Yet a part of me still yearned for their recognition. Emily was the only source of normalcy and goodness in my life, and I wanted my parents to see that. It happened on that fateful evening when she encountered everyone, including John. At that time, I didn't see any signs of anxiety. I foolishly thought their interaction was purely friendly and polite. After all, his fiancée was there, and I couldn't imagine any hidden motives behind their newfound friendliness. But from that evening onward, I started noticing changes in Emily's behavior. She grew distant, and it seemed like she wasn't putting as much effort into our relationship. Initially, I hesitated to admit this, fearing I might seem overly possessive or paranoid. I convinced myself that these worries were just products of my overactive imagination or that something was bothering Emily. She had always been my pillar of support, my confidant who I jokingly called my little therapist, the one I turned to for support. Unfortunately, I was too forgetful to connect the dots. In an attempt to prevent our relationship from falling apart, I tried to be close to her and offer constant support, but my efforts didn't seem to make a difference. Instead of appreciating my presence, Emily started seeing me as overly intrusive and invasive, as if I were prying too deeply into her life. Overnight, Emily stopped engaging in our usual activities like going to the movies or visiting amusement parks. Our conversations dwindled, and I found myself in a state of panic. It felt like I was on the verge of losing the only source of happiness in my life, and that thought was unbearable. Desperate to salvage our relationship, I made an impulsive decision to take on a second job at a local shoe store. I know it might sound feeble, but I genuinely believed that by being able to buy more things for her, I could bring joy back into our relationship. I clung to the hope that my gifts would rekindle the fading spark between us. She accepted them with visible pleasure, but unfortunately, they didn't improve our relationship in any way. No matter how hard I tried, nothing seemed to have a positive impact. In fact, the more I tried to win her back with gifts, gestures, and sacrifices, the quicker her love for me seemed to fade. In an effort to salvage what was left, I decided to surprise Emily by giving her some space, allowing her to breathe without feeling suffocated by my presence. I assumed she would want to see me after this break. There was some improvement in our conversations, which led me to believe that we were gradually repairing our relationship, or so I convinced myself to see a glimmer of hope in Emily's eyes. I saved money for several weeks to buy her the coveted bracelet she wanted, hoping it would be a tangible symbol of my love and dedication. The gift came with a beautiful bouquet of her favorite flowers. I desperately wanted her to understand the depth of my affection and how committed I was to our relationship. Looking back on it now, I can't help but cringe at how pitiful and desperate I appeared. As I approached her house, each step was filled with anticipation, and the mere thought of seeing her again was pure joy. It was excruciating to be away from her, but today I'd finally reunite with her. With a spare key in hand, I carefully entered her house, observing the faint glow of her lamps from beneath the door. However, as soon as I stepped inside, an unexpected sound reached my ears. It was an unusual sound, completely baffling. The source of these mysterious sounds emanated from her living room, distinct from the sounds of the TV. They echoed through the room with a clarity and realism that were almost tangible. They rebounded off the walls, creating a disconcerting atmosphere. Immediately, an anxious feeling gripped me, and my heart raced while a knot formed in my stomach. A wave of uncertainty washed over me, making me ponder whether to proceed or retreat. But curiosity overpowered caution and pushed me to move cautiously toward the source of the noise, trying not to startle her. With each step, the intensity of the sounds increased, sending a sickening feeling through me. When I cautiously peeked around the corner, my world shattered into countless pieces. There, on the very sofa where we had spent countless nights together, I saw a sight that tore my heart apart. Emily, the love of my life, was locked in an embrace with none other than my own brother. I froze in place as if time had stopped, struggling to grasp the betrayal unfolding before my eyes. My mind raced, desperately searching for some explanation for this nightmare. However, no reasoning could account for the depth of pain and betrayal I felt at that moment. It seemed that Emily's betrayal not only shattered our relationship but also shattered my very core. In a shocking act of betrayal, my own brother John not only betrayed me but also secretly started a relationship with my girlfriend, Emily. The pain I felt at that moment is beyond words, as if the very foundation of my world crumbled in an instant. Emily, whom I once considered the love and inspiration of my life, has now become the cause of my emotional devastation. As the room spun around me, the initial shock gradually gave way to an overwhelming surge of anger coursing through my veins. Feeling the weight of my emotions, I knew I had to get out of this toxic situation before doing something I'd regret. I quietly left this painful scene, and an unbearable pain pierced my heart. How could both John and Emily betray me like this? While I always had a strained relationship with John, the fact that he had an affair with my girlfriend was a cruel blow. It felt like he was meant to succeed in every aspect of life while I was always left on the sidelines. And Emily, despite everything that once connected us, my love for her had now turned into an intense, consuming hatred that I couldn't control. When my relationship with John was completely shattered, I was consumed by anger. In the following days, I gave Emily what she seemed to want most: distance. Fueled by rage, I took a few days off under the pretext of being sick and retreated to the basement. In my isolation, impulsive thoughts began to flood my mind, threatening to override my common sense. The desire to call John's fiancée and reveal the truth burned within me, but deep down, I knew that wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't satisfy the insatiable thirst for retribution that had taken hold of me. Then a sudden realization hit me like a lightning bolt. It became clear that I needed to ensure they faced the consequences for their actions directly. With this newfound determination, I arranged another family dinner, disguising it as an important announcement about significant changes in my life. The evening seemed normal with our parents present, but then my seemingly perfect brother and his unsuspecting bride joined us. His appearance, as if everything were normal, and his attempts to strike up a conversation with me, fueled my endless anger. His calm demeanor, as if his affair with my girlfriend meant nothing, infuriated me. I bided my time, waiting for everyone to sit down and enjoy the meal before making my move. However, just as I was about to speak, Emily intervened in the conversation. I couldn't help but notice her subtle hints, the change in her tone, the way she laughed at his jokes, and the wide smile she directed exclusively at him. It was unbearable. Desperate for attention, I seized the moment, pretending I was finally ready to share my long-awaited news. The audience fell into an expectant silence, eagerly awaiting my words. As all eyes turned to me, I stood up with a glass of wine in my hand. Carefully calculated, I turned to my brother, putting on a facade of admiration, and began showering him with praise, highlighting his achievements, and expressing deep pride in his relentless pursuit of his desires. He absorbed every word, relishing the attention. Deep down, it hurt to see his smug grin, as if his superiority remained intact despite my deliberate efforts to elevate him with compliments. Glancing at Emily, I noticed a distinct spark in her eyes when she looked at my brother. It was a mesmerizing look, as if he embodied everything she had ever wanted and more. I clung to the glass, threatening to shatter it under the pressure of anger, but I couldn't let go. A surge of rage surged through my veins, urging me to finish my speech quickly. With a forced smile, I raised my glass, congratulating my brother on his illicit affair with my girlfriend. A tense silence filled the room, and all eyes turned to the guilty couple. I felt an adrenaline rush, my heart pounded, my hands grew sweaty, but I held my composure and took a sip of raspberry wine. Except for Emily and John, everyone in the room wore expressions of surprise and disbelief. They looked like deer caught in headlights. Despite my mother's insistence for me to sit down, I remained firm, determined to share every detail of the events I'd witnessed. I felt that if I had witnessed it, they deserved to hear about it. And so I began my account. I spoke at length about where I found them and the compromising position they were in. Despite my parents' pleas for me to sit down, my gaze never left Emily's teary eyes. I couldn't help but think, how dare she shed tears now after the terrible act she had committed? She had the audacity to sit and pretend to be innocent. John tried to intervene, grabbing my arm and attempting to lead me to a chair, but I quickly pushed him away. I couldn't hold back my words. I needed to express everything that was boiling inside me. As a result, the emotions on the faces of those present ranged from bewilderment to anger. Emily and John exchanged guilty glances, unable to meet anyone's eyes. I remember letting out a bitter, ironic laugh meant solely for their benefit, and then I sank back into my seat, allowing the scene to unfold in front of me like a cinematic spectacle. I had shattered their pristine facade. My parents, who had always viewed my brother as the embodiment of perfection, looked at him with a mix of confusion and disappointment. I relished the moment, reveling in the truth revealed to them. They couldn't summon the courage to deny it. For a brief moment, I forgot about John's fiancée, but she quickly grabbed her glass and hurled it at my brother, causing me to burst into laughter as the wine cascaded down his face. Enraged, she stormed out of the room, tossing her engagement ring at him. My parents, who had always valued honesty and could never have imagined that their beloved son would turn out to be such a despicable person, were left dumbfounded. They chastised him for his complete lack of respect. There was shame and disappointment in their voices, sending a shiver down my spine. Emily, too, couldn't escape their attention. Their gazes turned to her, and they sternly ordered her to leave their house immediately. I didn't look in her direction. I had reached my limit in communicating with her. Even when she tried to apologize to all of us for the horror they had caused, her words entered one ear and quickly exited the other, having no effect. Truth be told, a part of my heart left with her as she walked out the door. When all was said and done, at that moment, I felt like I had hit rock bottom. The consequences were unavoidable. While my parents acknowledged my pain, they disapproved of how I handled the situation. They believed that my brother's fiancée deserved to learn the truth in a more respectful way, and for the most part, I agreed with them. I must admit, I was somewhat self-centered in that moment, but given the immense pain and profound loss I felt, it was nearly impossible for me to consider anyone else's perspective. As we retired to our bedrooms that evening, a heavy cloud of tension hung over the house. John's worst fears had come to pass. My parents regarded him with a mix of disdain and indifference, and eventually, despite the passage of time, they made the difficult decision to kick him out of our home. It became evident that this situation meant much more to our parents than we initially assumed. I suspect it was fueled by deep affection for his ex-fiancée. He humbled himself to the point of pleading for a change of heart, but they remained resolute in their decision. I couldn't help but sympathize with him, seeing how even his ex-fiancée rejected him and denied him the chance to explain himself. He was left to deal with this on his own. Speaking of his ex-fiancée, she shamelessly exposed him on social media, and many members of our community joined in the public condemnation. John, at one point, became a symbol of shame, the embodiment of dishonor in our town. As for Emily, from what I've heard, her life spiraled into turmoil. She left the fast food restaurant but maintained contact with one of her friends, who happened to be a coworker of ours. This friend confided in me, revealing that Emily was facing eviction due to substantial rental arrears, and the landlord took her to court. Living in a noisy trailer park, I made a firm decision to seek the same happiness that Emily once brought into my life, but this time I was determined to find it within myself. It may sound sentimental, but I embarked on a profound journey of self-discovery, during which I realized that I deserved more than what others could offer. That's how I reclaimed my destiny. By a stroke of luck, I landed a job that not only paid better but also offered me a chance to break free from my current life situation. When I truly tasted independence for the first time, everything else faded into the background. Here's a lesson I've learned along the way: never blame yourself for falling in love, and don't ignore warning signs. Most importantly, don't shoulder the blame for someone else's infidelity. If you know you've given your all, it reflects their character, not yours. Take this experience as a lesson and stay vigilant. Even when it comes to your own family, you never truly know someone's intentions. As she lay on her modest inflatable mattress amid fits of laughter, she confessed her simple desires to me. She didn't aspire to anything extravagant or complicated in life. Her dream was to become a kindergarten teacher, and when she saved enough money, she planned to further her education. It was she who unexpectedly brought up the topic of a date, and I could hardly believe the reality of the moment. Naturally, I accepted her offer, but it was hard for me to fathom that my efforts had been noticed and appreciated. It might sound silly, but in that moment, my 21-year-old self was filled with skepticism. This experience prompted me to adopt a completely new persona, a kind of shield to protect myself from potential rejection or the disappointed looks that sometimes met me. I made a firm decision to stop fixating on John and the image he represented, choosing to liberate myself from their influence. I boldly decided to distance myself entirely. Getting a job was my first step toward freedom, but it was meeting my new friend that truly illuminated my path and opened up a fresh perspective on life.